The day has now concluded, or more precisely, a full 12 hours have gone by since we first received the news regarding the searches conducted at the office of the head of the presidential office. Yes, indeed, at the actual office of the head of the presidential office, and furthermore, these actions also extended to his personal apartment. Today, Andriy Yermak is under close scrutiny from the anti-corruption agencies. But why do I emphasize that 10-12 hours have passed and there has been no communication? No crisis communication or anti-crisis, call it what you will, there's been none. Well, actually, there was a post from Yermak first thing this morning, and I'll be showing it to you a little later on. And that's pretty much it. Subsequently, the entire information sphere began to split in two. You know, much like the San Andreas fault in California, this entire information sphere is now being divided in half. And on one side, there's this absolute conspiracy theory suggesting that NABU and SAPO have transformed into instruments, as the proponents of this conspiracy claim tools wielded by Washington to coerce Zelensky into signing a total and complete capitulation to the Russian Federation. And why, in the opinion of those who propose this conspiracy theory, are Yermak's premises being searched precisely today? An indictment is also apparently expected to be announced, though as of this moment, while I speak with you, it has not yet been made public. So why today? Because yesterday, a huge article was published in the Atlantic Council where Andriy Borisovich stated that under no circumstances would Ukraine give up its very own territories. And so this is precisely the foundation upon which this entire massive conspiracy is constructed. Rather influential individuals, particularly within journalistic spheres, are voicing their opinions and unequivocally choosing sides. Here are a few slides I found for you. Let's read through them together. Please take a look. Roman Skripin states, and again, UP. So here's a direct criticism of the publication Ukrainska Pravda. And why is that? Because according to Roman Skripin, Thomas Fiala's publication, which stands in complete antagonism to the presidential office, is extraordinarily swift in its actions, grabbing all the prime headlines and stories. And Roman Skripin, from my perspective, is suspicious that Ukrainska Pravda is collaborating closely with NABU. That's why. Maybe professional jealousy, I don't know. Anyway, an absolute tool. Scum. They won't uncover anything at Yermak's place, perhaps a pencil case from his school days or a simple protractor. Believe me, they won't discover anything. It's not like they're after hidden stashes. If you were interested, NABU plus SAPO are now controlled by the oligarchic regime, and the SBI is under the presidential office. Two instruments which demonstrably engage in a struggle for liberation against each other, and then expletives follow, demonstrably exert pressure, so to speak, on one another. No one is genuinely interested in eradicating corruption. Everyone is keen on expanding its operations. I'm not finding it amusing, but you seem to be having a splendid time. And further on, there are additional phrases containing expletives. Well, Roman Skripin has the right to write his posts however he wants. Next, Katerina Kobunik. She's a representative of the independent publication Babel. And the publication Babel also apparently missed the story. I really don't know how else to explain this kind of intense, well, this kind of jealousy, you see. When NABU and SAPO publicly search for people who leak investigative actions but don't start with their own. A despicable source they leak investigative actions to. It's a total circus. It's an even greater circus to tell other journalists they don't comment on such actions. Well, so it's clear to everyone that leaking the content of the tapes. The searches at Yermak's were leaked, which is a hilarious scene where Mikhailo Tkach at 7 a.m. tries to find out who these individuals entering Mindich's building are. We get closer, it says NABU. Most people are okay with this being illegal, with them lying on camera and making fools of everyone. The main thing is to defeat evil. We'll remember the law after we win. That's right, don't stop. There's also yet another intriguing narrative, which I've already highlighted from the outset, directly linked to this specific publication that we're discussing, in which Andriy Yermak engaged in a conversation with the widely recognized and esteemed journalist interviewer Simon Schuster, specifically addressing the upcoming peace plan. And Andriy Borisovich clearly stated that under no circumstances would the president of Ukraine or he himself as the head of the negotiating team give up any territories. Absolutely no step back would be taken from the Ukrainian Donbass. And so it seems this particular article sparked these searches, which are now widely perceived as nothing short of a coercive move against the presidential office, essentially conveying the message, see, Volodymyr Alexandrovich, we can also influence you in this manner. Why? Well, because there's this prevalent stereotype within Ukrainian society and our political sphere that the anti-corruption agencies are merely Soros puppets, grant-dependent entities essentially subsisting on funds from American taxpayers. The ramifications of this entire process are indeed quite logical, culminating in the point where Andriy Yermak will eventually face an indictment. They will certainly affect maybe not the negotiation process itself, but definitely the configuration of the negotiating team. This is due to the fact that, in the event of an indictment, it is quite apparent that Andriy Yermak will be unable to carry on his activities within the negotiating team. Consequently, even in the absence of an official indictment, the ongoing searches at the presidential office now prompt questions concerning the planned meeting with Dan Driscoll, the U.S. Secretary of the Army, who is expected to arrive in Kyiv within the next day or two. This meeting had been planned. Now I'm unsure if Driscoll would still want to meet with an individual whose place is being searched, but who currently faces no indictment. Yes, there's quite an obvious influence. Just how critical is this whole situation? There are many individuals within the negotiating team who are authorized and capable of conducting these meetings. And then the story continues. Just a few days back, the publication Zerkalo Tizhnya released an intriguing piece revealing that Volodymyr Zelensky was aware, indeed he knew, that indictments were in preparation, not merely for Andriy Yermak, but also for Rustem Umerov. So sources at Zerkalo Tizhnya emphasized that if the president was indeed privy to this knowledge, then why did he empower both Umerov and Yermak to serve as representatives on the relevant negotiating team for such a serious situation that could unravel if NABU and SAPO become more actively involved? Now, if this information is already out, then this attempt at some kind of rescue effort, well, it simply isn't effective, you understand? It won't work. If indicted, Yermak's meeting with Driscoll won't occur. Consequently, a new head of the negotiating team will have to be appointed. This also extends to Rustem Umerov, who is effectively on the brink of an indictment himself. He's being treated as a witness, but it's still unclear what Yermak's status is. Therefore, my friends, when we speak of a conspiracy intended to disrupt negotiations or to exert pressure, Volodymyr Zelensky and his presidential office into signing a supposed capitulation, well, what we're discussing here are, in fact, entirely fabricated matters. Because the inherent structure of this specific negotiating track demands a certain degree of integrity from those individuals who are officially authorized to oversee and conduct these proceedings. If that information is indeed missing, and the presidential office knows, as Zerkalo Tizhnya writes, then certainly we could now easily conjure up a conspiracy theory. Mariana Bezula also shared her thoughts, stating that Volodymyr Zelensky knew about these indictments. You are aware that Mariana Bezula, despite her non-membership in the Servant of the People faction, consistently participates in their gatherings. She's essentially permitted entry, they await her and such. She surrenders her phone, heeds Volodymyr Alexandrovich. Everything appears normal. Therefore, she harbors a degree of resentment towards the political faction that initially ushered her into Ukraine's political sphere. Nevertheless, she boldly states her views, claiming that the president, despite being aware that Yermak and Umerov were on the brink of indictment, even though it hasn't happened yet, doesn't address these issues with them, but rather makes the decision to retain their roles at any cost, even by activating a latent track, which risks giving the United States reason to withdraw essential support in the form of intelligence data, arms sales, and statements. Had the scandal broken a month prior, Bezula writes, he would have sent Umerov to the Americans then. If later, he'd send him later. Yes, there, where Umerov is. Now to Yermak, it's basically the same question. Paulina Pinheiro, a spokesperson for the European Commission. We are now starting to see reactions emerging from the European Union. Incidentally, this particular story presents itself as quite interesting. She perceives absolutely no issue with the head of the presidential office currently being subject to intense examination by Ukraine's anti-corruption agencies. Furthermore, the European Commission exhibits absolutely no concern or apprehension regarding the eventual signing of these capitulatory terms, nor is it troubled by whether this constitutes undue pressure or any other factor. They're speaking unequivocally, offering a positive assessment of the searches. This is because it clearly demonstrates that Ukraine's anti-corruption branch within its law enforcement system is functioning effectively. Thus, pardon me, the European Union's funds, which have been infused into Ukraine starting from, say, 2015, since the establishment of these anti-corruption agencies, were certainly not expended for naught. This is because the president of Ukraine's right-hand man is currently under intense scrutiny, and this development truly delights the European Union indeed. And there is absolutely no mention of who might be exerting pressure or in what direction or anything of that nature. I've already, well, whether you choose to agree with me or not, that's entirely your prerogative. I have repeatedly emphasized that, in principle, the anti-corruption track within domestic policy is, in essence, a separate and distinct path, my friends. It truly cannot be adapted to or influenced by events unfolding on the front lines, nor by the temperament of either Putin or Volodymyr Zelensky. This narrative pertains to the root eradication of a disgraceful phenomenon, specifically corruption. If suspicions exist and are properly formalized and presented, then an investigation, a trial, or whatever else is necessary must ensue, and these allegations absolutely need to be substantiated. And having to adjust based on who is and who isn't part of our negotiating team, that's utterly preposterous and makes absolutely no sense. Regrettably, it simply doesn't operate in that manner. Paradoxically, these anti-corruption agencies exhibit their peak efficacy precisely when the nation's very existence hangs in the balance. This situation, in turn, could potentially evolve into something significant. I wouldn't call it an argument, but more like, the foundation upon which expressing the opinion that, it's not the right time, but what, when, and what in principle is ever the right time for us. You see, I believe Andrei Yermak himself comprehends this, as demonstrated by the post he subsequently published. This is the sole official communication we currently possess at this moment. NABU and SAPO are indeed conducting procedural actions at my home. There are no impediments whatsoever for the investigators. They've been granted complete and unrestricted access to the apartment. My lawyers are present on site, interacting with law enforcement officials. From my side, there's complete assistance being provided. Well, complete cooperation. And then you might ask, what's next? But where is the outrage that this is like an act against the state? All right, I have one more thing to wrap up. So there's this Telegram channel. Some members of parliament, those providing specific information, state that the Telegram channel Kharkovy Office is a channel that, in essence, is overseen by the head of the presidential office. And well, if we were to imagine that this were the case, then let's proceed to read what is actually written there, shall we? The admin's phone was handed over. In this case, NABU is working against Ukrainian interests. An American delegation is supposed to arrive soon. Nothing terrible would have happened if the searches had been conducted after the negotiations. In this specific instance, a mere couple of days changes nothing. Yet NABU, led by Lyovochkin's associate Krivonos, aggressively intervenes right before the scheduled meeting. This is the stance. Well, you understand? You see, I don't really have much more to add, as it were, to say about this. So, whether you choose to believe it or not, the decision is yours. Let's just patiently await perhaps a statement from the president. Maybe that will fully clarify this story for us.